Namaste and welcome to Bhoom of Bharat with Rama Kumar, founder CEO SRK Game Changers, where we bring you a new update each week on GCC. SRK Game Changer is a GCC consulting services organization providing advisory, governance, and setup services across talent, business operations, and workplace solutions. We deliver customized, high performing global capability centers that encourage artificial intelligence and digital innovation. We leverage the expensive skill talent proof and groom the next generation leaders of tomorrow. Our tailored workplace solutions build technology as a core foundation. And thank you so much for the encouraging remarks and the feedback you're sharing to us for our podcast and the uniqueness of themes we choose to discuss with our guests. And today, again, we have our guest, a very unique person, Nitin Deshpande, a veteran in shaping global delivery models and helping multinationals organizations unlock value through India. With his experience as a board member, CXO advisor, Nitin brings a pragmatic and visionary lens to why mid sized companies should act now to harness India's GCC advantage. And again, we have a very unique theme today where we are saying reimagining global operations, global capability centers as engines of innovation and global growth. So, Nitin, welcome to our podcast. And for the benefit of our audience, if I may request you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Rama. It's a great pleasure to be here and talk on this podcast. Just as a part of introduction, I've been in the industry for about 45 years, all in the not all in the GCC space, but all in the IT space. Because obviously GCC as a concept itself did not exist when I started. But last about 20 plus years, I've been building GCCs, growing them, scaling them up, and so on. So about 18 years in the US healthcare space. Before that, a few years in the systems management space. And then I've also had an entrepreneurial stint both in India and North America. I have run some services companies also. So I hope to bring all that experience, to bear in terms of what this podcast, what questions you're going to ask. So very happy to hear, like I said.
No, thank you. And once again, welcome, Nitin. You have been a part of the global journey and you've also led and set up global capability centers. With your last role as president, Evolent International, you have witnessed multiple waves of transformation. How do you see the role of India based GCCs evolving in the next 3 to 5 years? Any mindset shifts are needed, especially for mid sized US and European companies?
Yeah, let's look at it on both ways. One is from the GCC mindset, the local mindset, and one is from the global mindset. So, from a GCC mindset, earlier the idea was very simple: deliver at low cost. I mean, that was the mantra for everybody. But that has completely changed, and unfortunately, not all GCCs, the local leaderships, have embraced that. So they still keep looking at the number of people and the cost per person, etc., as the key metrics. I'm not saying they are not important; they continue to be important, but more importantly, what's the value you add and what's the kind of difference you make to the overall corporation. That's probably the way people should be thinking. And in a very similar way, even when it comes to global headquarters, some of them are enlightened, and I've heard some of the headquarters say that, look, even if India was to cost as much as let's say the US or Europe, we would still go there for the talent that we get there. But this is the exception rather than the rule. There are a lot of people who are still looking at it as a cost play, cost arbitrage play, rather than really focus on the innovation, the value that you can add, the value you can add in various ways, not just in terms of efficiency, in terms of labor, but in terms of maybe using the latest technologies, using automation, and so on and so forth. So on both sides, probably the enlightened ones are already doing it, but there's a vast majority which needs to embrace the new form of GCC rather than the just the cost arbitrage piece.
Okay. So thank you so much. I think it's good to hear that people are looking at from a value add perspective as well. So talent is definitely there. Any other two to three differentiators you feel apart from talent, which could play a very significant role or a vital role in idle for global delivery?
Sure, sure. Let me pull out a few things. I mean, of course, cost, as you said, is given. Number talent availability is given, but beyond that, let's say one thing which comes to mind straight away is the flexibility that the Indian workforce offers. Oftentimes, you hear, particularly in Europe and sometimes even in the US, the kind of no emails after 5 p.m., no working on weekends, etc. Now, I'm not saying that you got to work 70 hours a week like it's been often talked about, but at the same time, the flexibility that the India workforce offers in terms of even if they were to work in their normal working hours, is obviously because of the time zone difference, there is a inbuilt sort of a follow the sun opportunity available. But even beyond that, generally speaking, India employees are willing to have some overlap hours, work maybe if required, if it is a critical thing, work on their holiday or work on the weekend, etc. And of course, you compensate them. I'm not saying that you exploit them, but you can still have a good balance. So essentially, flexibility. So that's one thing which I can definitely say is different in India. Secondly, the versatility of the talent. What I mean by that is, typically you will find that the India workforce is better educated. Now, again, I'm not trying to say that the education is the greatest of all, but just the exposure. If somebody is, let's say, a graduate or a postgraduate, as opposed to a high school dropout or high school pass, or particularly if they are MBAs, or there are so many people. I've had assistants who have been MBAs from good schools. Now, the kind of value that they bring and the kind of um, tasks that they can perform, the kind of projects that they can take up, are very, very different in nature. And to top it all, typically the talent in India also wants to do different things. I've seen examples abroad where people say, look, this is what my job is, that's all I will do, I will not do something else. Whereas in India, if you keep telling the person just do your job, they will get bored and leave. So they want to do different things, they want to dabble into adjacent areas, they want to dabble into something different. So that's again a huge advantage. And because of that, there's fungibility. So suppose there's somebody who's working with you, and then let's say somebody else leaves in a slightly different or related or even unrelated department. People are willing to jump in and say, okay, I'll give it a shot, I'll try it out, I just need a little bit of training, I am willing to work on that. And that's the inherent psyche that the Indian workforce brings to the table, and that I think is another huge advantage. So maybe these are just a couple of them that I talked about.
No, thank you so much for this. That's a great example. And if you also look at the, Mars, I would say our India is going to Mars. That's the same thing it talks about. How you said it's not 8 hours, we can work 15 hours and, create that. So that's really wonderful. So I would, on the little side, because you've done a lot of transformations. So what's your outlook from an India perspective on the digitalization or AI native that you feel that we should be kind of focusing on for the next 5 years? Where do you see us?
Yeah. In fact, this is coming at the right time when some large companies have announced some layoffs, and the people are very worried as to what's happening to the Indian software industry and so on. So again, without say, I'm not a believer in doomsday prophecies like that. We have seen many other revolutions come and go, and been able to weather that. Yes, there will be some short-term pain, etc. But to come back to the specific question that you asked, the Indian workforce is digitally much more savvy than many other places. Even though we are not the first world nation by any stretch of imagination, we are still a developing nation. Some of the things that we have are really game changing. Take the India stack, for example. They include the UPI, and the things like DigiYatra, things like DigiLocker. So everybody kind of, or even just take a simple example of ordering food and ordering, Porter and Dunzo, and all these things. I mean, everybody and anybody. My 5-year-old grandson is today saying, let's okay Google, what's the weather like. It's like at that stage where people, even kids, in not even yet in first grade, are aware of some of the digital nature of business, and everything is kind of becoming digital much more so than in even in the advanced economies. And of course, there's this, because of the whole hype around AI and all that. So today, when the graduates are coming out of college, or even school for that matter, they are ready, at least conceptually. Now, I'm not saying that. In fact, I do agree that a whole lot of them are need to be trained, need to be kind of groomed. But unfortunately, companies are also able to do that. But even there are other institutions which are able to do the final grooming. But doesn't matter what they are learning today, they are learning the digital way. And and obviously, as we all know, the number of people coming out, the graduates coming out, is just unsurpassed. I mean, no other country produces those kinds of graduates. So that, combined with the fact that they are already digitally native, is that huge advantage. Now, again, how long it will last, it's anybody's guess. But at least for a foreseeable future, I don't see that advantage going away. And this is a golden opportunity for the Indian industry to kind of utilize it to its advantage.
In fact, I see that very important stuff, from a perspective like Viksit Bharat 2047. We are talking about, all digitally trained. And when one of my customers came to India, and he was surprised to say that, okay, even your, like, small shops are able to, take, 10 rupees tea barcode. You don't need to carry that kind of a card with you, or a currency with you. So that's really very, very good thing which has happened for us in India. And I would also, now that we're talking about digitalization, and a lot of time, when you look at from a global capability centers perspective, a lot of time mid-sized firms, think about, how about having a strong data backbones, data governance and compliance is very important for them. So how can GCCs help these mid-sized firms create strong data backbones, from data governance and compliance to enabling real-time decision making and customer intelligence? Any examples you may want to share?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, oftentimes people get, when people come from abroad, they get surprised at the lack of traffic rules adherence or compliance. And and we all know that, unfortunately, our country is not well known for doing compliance with traffic rules and so on. But surprisingly, to me, surprising, because you could easily imagine that, well, it's going to be the same when it comes to adhering to corporate mandates or privacy laws and so on. But I'm really impressed that, as far as the workforce is concerned, which is working in GCCs or even services industry, which is serving the foreign customers, it's been remarkably good. The uh, both a combination of training and sort of so as they say, trust but verify. So there are a lot of mechanisms in place where we kind of check as to whether anybody is tampering with data or breaching data and so on and so forth. So over the long tenure that I've had very, very few instances where data has been compromised, even the smallest amount. I'm not saying that those don't exist, but I think it's remarkable, given the size of of our workforce, how little that has happened, and we have been able to generally cure the breach very quickly, and not had any major incidents. So that is one big positive. Some of the other countries which claim to do work offshore cannot say that, and that's a big advantage for India, where we have been able to protect. And again, we have worked in very sensitive industries like healthcare, like telecom, like BFSI, and all of these, and where a lot of sensitive information, both whether it's PHI or PII and so on, has been entrusted, and that has gone very well. That's on the data sort of data management, data protection side. Also, in terms of your question was about using the data for real time kind of whether it's customer support, whether it's any other things, or even predictive analytics and so on. So even on that front, India has done really well in terms of being able to use that data in a very effective way. I remember one company that I used to work for. Initially there was a lot of apprehension when we set up the customer support unit in India, and from move those some of the work from the US to India. And people are worried not just about the accent and so on, but even in terms of whether the end users, the customers, would get upset that they are talking to somebody in India. So fast forward literally just about over a year, and we already had examples where the customers, they would call, and we still had some presence in the US and some presence in India, and they would specifically say, I want to talk to somebody in India. Why? Because I am guaranteed to get a better answer, not just just postpone the problem, but I'm more likely to get a solution, a resolution, than if I talk to somebody in the US. So this was obviously a combination of the right kind of people, the right kind of training, and the right kind of data available to them. So the having the right systems behind so that they could quickly look up the data, and the fungibility that I talked about earlier, being more educated, connecting the dots, connecting pieces together, that ability. And they were generally much better educated than their counterparts who are doing the same job in the US. All this put together, we were able to satisfy the customers. Our customer satisfaction scores went up as a result, as opposed to what people were imagining that it will go down. So that would be an example of how things can work out if you have the right data in the hands of the right people.
That if you look at even the public services in UK, all of them are actually operating out of India. Their centers are operating out of India, so that's a good thing to bring that about. And coming back to a lot of discussion these days is about location. Where should be the location of there? Are all top metros, if you look at, are already being already there. We have a lot of big four companies, or I would say let Fortune 500 companies are already there. So how do you see that companies are exploring tier 2 cities, any state incentives, the ecosystem, the talent? How do you see that?
Yeah, great question, because I don't come from a metro city. I grew up in a small town, so it was the biggest disadvantage they that time was there were no jobs in those towns, and there was no choice but to move to a bigger city. I chose the smallest big city that I could find and came to Pune. But now I'm happy to say that a lot of the tier 2 and even tier 3 cities, those are really coming up in a big way. So what has changed? One, of course, COVID taught us a big lesson, right? I mean, everybody went home, and work continued, and suddenly we realized that both the companies realized that work can happen remotely. Number two, the individuals realized how much they were missing, not living in a small city with no commute times, being with their families and friends and all that. And of course, cost of living was obviously much lower. So because of that, there's a big realization that came, and a lot of people now started preferring to live there. What has that has changed the scenario to an extent where even if you go to a small town, let's say you go to a Chandigarh or a Nagpur or a Surat or a Tiruchirappalli or wherever, right, Raipur, you suddenly find people who have worked in large companies earlier, who have the whole ecosystem already internalized, but are able to work from small cities, and therefore more and more business is also coming from there. And it's not just IT, by the way. For other reasons, manufacturing industries also went to smaller towns, particularly because of the cheaper land, government incentives, and so on. And as a result, what happened was the whole ecosystem in terms of education, in terms of the other, whether it's malls, whether it's entertainment, whether it's all of that also started building up. And of course, the overall GDP going up across the country has also helped in that process. So as a result, though we are nowhere near the Western world levels, a small town pretty much offers you everything that you could do in a big city if you have sufficient money. And typically in this industry, money is one thing which is better than the other industries, and therefore they can afford to go send their kids to the best schools. They can afford to have the same kind of lifestyle and save a lot of money and be near the near and dear ones. So that everything put together, it has become a huge. And what's the advantage to the industry? It's basically that they are able to get people, not just the real estate and facilities is at a lower cost, but people are willing to work at a rate which is slightly lower, because even then they save much more. So it's a win-win situation, and in the process, there's a more inclusive kind of a development which is happening. And some of the like I've seen a couple of companies in Nagpur which who are doing path breaking work, absolutely cutting edge work which can rival with anything in Bangalore or Pune or Delhi. So that availability of good talent, availability of good resources apart from human resources, it's all there. So and if you were for a GCC particularly, so if you were doing a like a large services industry, then there typically they want to have a center which is at least 1,000 people or more, right? GCCs are typically not that big. You're talking about 50s, hundreds, maybe a few hundred at the most. Now, because of that, there is really no dearth of talent. It's not like you're not going to find the talent in the small cities. You don't need to be in a Bangalore or in a Delhi to find 50 engineers or 50 BPO operators or whatever it is that you're looking for. So that has really made a change, and I really think that's a big positive for both sides. It's a win-win situation.
In fact, I will say that today you see a very healthy competition between the states. Okay, invest UP, invest AP, Telangana. Today, Kerala is talking about, Haryana is talking about, Rajasthan. Then Maharashtra. I think, and each of these states have a different policies to lure, and especially when you're talking about tier two. Look at our even Pune, how kind of resources, the talent which is available, and the kind of offering which is being provided. Now it used to be automobile only companies, and today you look at even IT GCCs which are coming to kind of set up there. So thank you for bringing that point. My last question, which is going to be more about for a very hesitant CXO, what do you see? They're very unsure about setting up their GCCs, and so what risk factors do you foresee are stopping them? Is there anything we could do differently?
Yeah, there are a lot of myths still. Even though we have tried to educate, and things are much different than what it was earlier. I don't know whether how many of you know this story, but the first time a offshore was proposed, offshore by a services company, they just said, how can you work remotely? You have to be in our office. And then literally what this company did was they rented an office right across the street from the company, the prospect, and they said, we will set up a team there free of cost for you, and we'll do the work instead of from your office, we'll do it from there and see whether it works. And when it worked with absolutely seamlessly, they said, look, if it can be across the street, it can be in India. And that's how they first convinced. Now we have come a long way from there. Everybody accepts now that it's something which is not only doable but should be done. But there are these myths still perpetuate. For example, one of the things that I often hear is about the cost inflation, salary inflation. Oh, your increments are double digit every year, so soon that whole advantage of cost will go away. Well, it's not true, because I've been, like I said, working for 4+ decades, and the rate in dollar per hour terms has hardly moved. Why? Not because we are not paying better to people, but because the dollar also keeps appreciating at the same time. Same with euro, same with pound, same with all of them. So which means that like the currency depreciation of the rupee with respect to the developed nations is actually a boon for the exporters. And that's one thing. The other thing would be they feel that how will we have domain knowledge? You don't have any customer connect, right? Particularly if your market is only in the developed nation and not in India. For those who also sell in India, it's a little easier, but a lot of them sell in the let's say US or Europe, and they say, well, how will your people be able to do the work when they don't have customer context? But now things have changed. Several reasons, like again COVID, for all the bad things that it brought to us, also taught us a lesson that you don't need to meet in face to face, right? You can do the same thing, right? Like right now we are talking, you could do the same thing over a Zoom call or a any video meeting. That's one. Number two, that people are able to find travel and get some face to face contacts. Number three, there are surrogates available. So for example, a lot of when I was with systems management company, what we found was that our markets were in the developed nations, but who was operating those systems? Those people were sitting in India in the large services companies. So though they are the guys who are using our tools, so we said they are our real customers because they are the real users, not the company that you're selling to. Those tools are being given back to the Indians. So surrogate customers is yet another thing, right? So there are so many different ways in which you can get the customer context. We also did something like kind of a rotation. So sent people, engineers or others from here, spent a month sitting side by side with the users, and then figured out, okay, how is the software really being used. This is a software example, but it applies for almost everything, right? The other thing which again people say sometimes is that, oh, you are almost on the other side of the world, so how will we manage the overlap? So there are two things which actually work. One is, overlap is not always required. In fact, not having an overlap can be used to your advantage using follow the sun model. So when people are working in the US, they finish up to a certain stage, drop it in a shared drive, they go to bed, people in India pick it up, they polish it, they do everything, and then it's back available to the people in the US the next day. That's one thing which people don't understand. They have not used it enough, the whole follow the sun approach. That's one. Number two, overlap is not, even if your overlap is needed, it's not needed 8 hours a day, right? I mean, so again, you can do a creative way of saying that first half of in India time, we do what was the backlog from yesterday. Second half we overlap with people, and then they take over, and so kind of like follow the sun, but using that overlap to your advantage without anybody really bothering with the body clock. So that's another thing which third thing sometimes is, depending on the job you do, is language skills. So I gave an example of a customer support place earlier, and that was a big issue. Will people, how about the accent and this and that? Interestingly, these days, whether you talk about the US or UK and many other nations, some particularly depending on the industry you are in. So if you're talking to a nurse in the US, quite likely she'll be in Malayali or Filipino. If you're talking to somebody in the UK, again, so this thing about accent, I mean, they're already, it's so multicultural and so global that his accents are not important so long as you can be understood. And for that, you don't need an American or a UK accent. What you need is a neutral accent. So that is easy to do. And when it comes to actual language skills, particularly on the English side, I think India is unparalleled. I mean, not many people know that the largest English newspaper is in India, not anywhere else, right? Etc. Etc. So many myths around the language. Um, Finally, one other myth which sometimes people worry about is, oh, your attrition is so high, right? I mean, first of all, there were times when attrition was high, but those days are gone. Point number one. So these days, even if you're a good GCC, you will always have single digit attrition. You will not have double digit attrition, which is the case even in the US or even in the developed economies. It's not uncommon to have maybe marginal difference between the attrition. That's one. And number two, what people don't realize is attrition can be managed, meaning even if the attrition is say 10%, right? Your work shouldn't have to suffer just because your attrition is 10%. If you have the right processes, if you have the right knowledge base, if you have the right succession planning, then attrition, in a way, some amount of attrition is good for you. you don't become stagnant. You kind of keep getting new ideas. So that's the other myth that sometimes people have, that oh, there's a lot of attrition. And so I'll give you a quick example. In the Philippines, the BPO industry has a huge attrition. So that's what I'd heard. So when I was setting up a center there, I asked them, I heard attrition is pretty high, and so what is it like? How much is it? He said, oh yeah, it's not too bad. It's about 4 to 5%. I said, that's not bad at all. 4 to 5%. That's better than what we have. So he said, no, you don't have so much. I said, yeah, of course. We have like 9 to 10%. He says, what are you talking about? So then we realized I was talking annual numbers, they were talking monthly numbers. So they were talking 4 to 5% per month. I said, how on earth do you manage with 4 to 5% per month? That's like 50 to 60% per year. They said, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because our processes are such that we have a well oiled machine training people, and even if people leave, that's fine. So I'm not recommending that you should have such high attrition, but some attrition can easily be managed with the right processes. It doesn't have to be all in the head. So these were some of the myths that I have heard.
No, no, thank you so much, Nitin. It was such an enriching experience, and the thought leadership you shared on GCCs and how technology is shaping future strategy. And you also spoke about how we are positioning India at the heart of this conversation. And thank you so much for joining us on Bhoom of Bharat. It was really very enriching discussion, especially when you spoke about surrogate technology, or how we could look at that's another stuff to look at that. So once again, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And for the viewers, thank you for tuning in to this special episode of Bhoom of Bharat. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights on the ideas and innovations shaping our world. If you have any thoughts or stories to share on this topic, we would love to hear from you. You could connect with me on LinkedIn, SRK Game Changers, or drop your questions on our website, srkgamechangers.com. Until next time, namaste from Bhoom of Bharat.